Hey, hi and welcome. Looks like a warm day out there. Gonna do a take two with the whippersnipper over to the graveyard again. Got a fish that my whippersnipper threw a hissy fit on me yesterday and decided not to work. Why? Because it broke down on me. Which brings me to the topic of this video. So, you love motorcycles. Check. You've got your motorcycle license. Check. Check out my hat. Check. You've got love for classic motorcycles. Check. You got money in your pocket. Just burn it a hole. Just burn it right through. And if you don't get that money out of there and spend it on your dream bike, it's gonna just set your nuts on fire. Check. Ouch. Anyway. Okay, so then the question becomes well, what classic bike do you buy? Well, if you're in North America, most people are probably going to go with some sort of Harley. Maybe it's a little Sportster. Maybe like a classic 48 panhead like I had. Whether it's a chopper version or a full retro version. For this purpose of this video, I'm going to be talking more, period correct, retro mod, slight mod. Like okay, this used to be a 6-volt bike. Now it's 12-volt. Good luck trying to find a 6-volt anything nowadays, right? Because we've moved up to 12-volt. I'm pretty sure in a couple of decades, everything will be 36 or 48-volt, and even better, right? If they're not all electric. So you find a couple of bikes out there. The classics are going to be, obviously, Harleys in North America is going to be the big one, whether it's a shovelhead, panhead, pre-Evo stuff. Basically, all the bikes I'm talking about are going to be pre-1980, okay? So what I call classic bikes are, yes, I know there's classic is 25 years, vintage is 50 years or something like that, and then 75 years is antique, whatever. I can't remember the exact order it falls in, but you get the idea. We're talking old bikes, so pre-1980 stuff, okay? Pretty much anything after 1980 actually usually runs pretty good, although there's some manufacturers that weren't quite up to scratch up until recently. Like, for example, Ducatis. Ducatis were never known for great reliability, or MV Agusta or something like that. They weren't very good for reliability up until, mid-80s. Some of the bikes were getting more reliable. 90s, and then, of course, the 2000s, everything was fuel injected, and you get all the idea. So Harleys can be really, really reliable once you get the bugs out of them. The biggest thing that makes Harleys unreliable is fingers. Yes, fingers. Why? Because people read things like Easy Rider magazine. I don't even know if Easy Rider magazine is still out there, but if it is, cool. And they see some guy and he's put heckler pipes, drag pipes that are this long off the manifolds. They're completely blue. Maybe cooking the valves, and a 61 millimeter SU carb on a 1200 cc or 1340 cc engine, which is way overcarbed. A friend of mine had a downdraft Weber on his 54 pan. Looked badass, but he had to put to keep it running. It was a 84 millimeter or 72 or 84 millimeter Weber carb or 73 millimeter Weber carb, whatever it was, which was way overkill for a panhead, right? But he made it work. He said the number 26 jet got like 75 miles to the gallon once he got it dialed in. But the other problem he kept getting was icing because of the tube that came down into the carb. Although this wasn't period, it was a chopper. He ended up wrapping some copper wire around the tube and then tying it, around one of the bolt heads, so that the heat would go through and preheat to keep it from icing up on him. So yeah, that put him on the side of the road quite a bit of times. People running around with with the original linkered carburetor, the old linker carburetor. These carburetors, I bet you could take my old 48 panhead to Antarctica. Okay, give it 2 kicks. Leave it there for a year, okay, to freeze. Give it 2 kicks and the damn thing would start. This bike would just start and start and start. But then it would break down about every 40 miles because the plugs would foul up because it's a linkered carburetor. The linkered carburetors were notorious for running too rich, and you couldn't really dial them in that well. There was a little needle jet that while you were riding, you would lean it out while you were riding. it was farm equipment, right? But other than that, a super reliable carb for starting. Great low end torque coming out of that sucker. Linker carburetors, if you can keep them running great, fine. But they're a lot of maintenance, right? And a lot of guys buy these classic bikes and they don't know the tricks to keeping these bikes going. You learn something new every day on a bike like that, and they'll be like, well, okay, I'm going to ride this bike everywhere. And then it's like, well, okay, after they've been pushed the bike home a few times because they didn't have money for towing, starving student at the time, right? You're like, okay, well, I'm just going to ride it in the nice weather. I'm just going to ride it, just around the block type of thing. And then they don't ride them because, oh, well, it's too old anyway. And you're missing out. So it's like, okay, well, maybe if you picked a better platform, maybe be a little bit more reliable. So my Panhead, eventually I got it super, super reliable. I was getting, when I switched over to the key and carb, I ended up getting rid of the linker. My bike wasn't period correct. It was a chopper, so I wasn't worried about period correct. But even if I did buy a period correct bike, if I was going to ride it around, maybe you throw a Mikuni on there or a Kean like I had. And what I went with the linker, to give you an idea of how rich that carb ran and why I ended up with so many problems. I always had a few spare plugs in my my pocket all the time, back when the Harley plugs were only like $3 a piece. So I had 4 sets, and I would just rotate, clean them, and put them back in. But originally I was getting about 23 miles to the gallon on my little peanut tank, and about 13 miles to the gallon in the city. Yeah. So you rich, and that was leaned out as much as I could get it. That was taking that carb off maybe once, twice a week, cleaning it. Man, that bike was a lot of maintenance after. And then I put the Kean on. I never took it off again, and I was getting 45 miles to the gallon to start. And it was underjetted. It was running a little bit too lean, and it didn't have the power of the linker, and it didn't start quite as nice as the linker. But man, it was reliable as hell, And it was also that linker carburetor that cost me the top end, because it ran so rich. It fouled the plugs all the time, but it also fouled the top of the pistons, and there was like literally about a 1/4 inch of crust of on the top of the pistons of carbon buildup. So no wonder it cost me a top end, right? Plus, the bike was kind of a bit of a swap meet special, whatever. But anyway, I digress. But the point is it was a lot of maintenance just keeping that bike running when I first got it. Now, once I learned all the tricks on how to, work with a generator, polarizing the generator and stuff like that, and if I'm losing you on the lingo, that this is what you're going to deal with classic bikes. Is everything's going to have its little quirks and quirks. So Harleys are a great place to start, because the nice thing is, let's say you want a 1936 knucklehead or flathead, whatever, okay, and you want to go all vintage, but you can't find one anywhere, but you have infinite amount of money. You can build 100% period correct 1936 up Harley Davidson, probably even some of the 1935 bikes too, like the JDs and stuff like that. And you could probably build these things period correct without one original Harley part on them. You could build an entire 1948 Panhead. You could buy them as a kit. All period correct, OEM spec, not one Harley part on it. So when it comes to parts availability, especially here in North America, I'm in Canada, Harley's the way to go. Pick a year, any year. You could build it period correct, no problem. Now, what if you don't really want Harleys, or you don't want something that big, like a 1,000 or a 1,200 or a 1340 or the 750 flatties? I always wanted a flathead. Maybe you want an old WRL, war bike, one of those. Maybe you got one of those really rare Harley Davidson. What were they called? The one with it basically copied BMW engines. They're very, very rare. Maybe you got one of those. Okay, that one you might find hard to get parts for. But other ones, yeah, no problem. So yeah, you got lots of choice there. But like anything, depends on where you're starting. If you're starting from a ground, buy a basket case and ground up build, yeah, you're going to have no problems. But if you're buying a running basket case, as I call it, you can get it going and it'll putt down the road, but it might leave you somewhere a few times. Yeah, you're going to get bikes like that too. But that said, Harleys, the older ones are pre-Evo is maintenance. Okay, it's a bike that you're going to wrench on it from, if you're a type of person that you don't want to wrench on anything, no, you're going to wrench on it a couple of times a week, depending on how many times you ride it. You're going to be constantly tweaking things. I find my Triumphs like that now, where I'm constantly checking things and stuff like that. It's just, I never have to adjust anything because it's a modern bike, right? Although there are things that are, there's little finickinesses that you got to work out. As things you just got to learn to live with. So what about Triumph? Well, Triumph, same as the Harley. I mean, you can pretty much. I was looking at some really gorgeous Triumph 1958 Triumph there at the show, the Knobs show that I went to about 2 weeks ago. I'm waiting for another motorcycle show to pop up, but it's not for a while. I figured there'd be so many of them this season, but there doesn't seem to be a lot. They're there, but I mean locally anyway. Like there's not a lot local. Usually there is, but anyway. So I'm looking at a 1958 T110 Triumph Tiger, and I've ridden the Tiger before. My friend of mine, he had a little Triumph Tiger. I can't remember what year it was, and single carb, and it was a cool bike. It was a hardtail frame, no front fender. It had the gaiters on the front like my panhead front end, and peanut tank. Now, it's going to sound like a weird color, but it was lime green, or lime yellow, sorry. Kind of like the chip bag yellow, but more lime. And it had black flames on the tank with pinstripe. It actually looked so good. And I remember riding this thing. We did a bike swap. He wanted to see what it was like to ride my big old panhead, and I rode this. And this bike, it was great, but man, I mean, every time him and I went riding, we both brought a bag of tools with us. Why? Because that little Triumph broke down every 50 miles. It was just breaking down all the time. And like most guys, they buy these old bikes because they get them for a price they can afford, but they don't realize they can't afford to run them. It'd almost be better just to buy the bike, just completely tear it right down right from the get-go, and then put it on the road the season after. But I know what it's like when you're younger. It's like, got to have it on the road right away, and then, make that your second bike. Everybody wants that classic bike to be their primary ride. It doesn't work like that at first. It might. But this guy with the 58 Triumph rode all the way from, I think, Brockville or the other far side of Brockville to up here to Ladysmith. So you're looking at round trip of over 100 miles. Or 200 miles there and back, probably. About 180 miles there and back. So, I mean, he got up, and the guy was 85 years old, and he rode it all the way there. Not a hiccup. This guy, that's the only bike he rides, apparently, is this. Well, I think he might have a tour bike, but whatever. But he rides this 58 Triumph. But this thing was so clean, and again, if you're watching this channel, you'll have seen pictures of it, and you'll see the videos of it. And it's just such a gorgeous machine, meticulously put together, So he probably had to work a lot of bugs out of it. But the Triumphs, the oil pumps. Everybody I know that had a Triumph, was the oil pumps always went on them. There's other things that are funky on Triumphs. So they're the same as the Harleys, where you're going to be tinkering with them an awful lot. They're going to leave you on the side of the road an awful lot until you get all the bugs worked out of them. Once you get the bugs worked out of them, then you got to maintain them quite a bit. Same way as a Harley. So it's like every ride you're going to do a little inspection, and when you get back, you're going to do a little secondary inspection to see if how it does. I know there's going to be the guy, I ride mine, I got 5 million miles on mine. Yeah, but you probably put a lot of money into it to get it that way, and you've probably done other things such as took the AML carbs off and put some Akunis on there. Why? Because you just want it to run, You just want it to run. Plus the carbs, they wear out. These old carbs, they wear out and stuff like that. And when you do a bike show, you might put them on for the bike show, but you'll probably, keep the other carbs on just for daily runners. Like a Slider Makuni and stuff like that, or K&N or whatever you're going to put on there. Just something more modernized, so that you get the better mileage, but also you don't get the plugs fouling as much. These bikes will foul. These older bikes will foul up plugs anyway, even if you're running clean, brand new carb on there or whatever, just because of the way they burn the fuel. It's old technology, right? So that you do go through plugs over time, stuff like that. So they become high maintenance bikes. Now Norton, what about a Norton? Nortons are great, very hard to keep running. Nortons were never known for reliability, even when they were new. I've only seen a handful of Norton Commandos in my time. There was a Norton 850 Commando at the bike show too, and the guy took off before I got a chance to really. And it was one of the bikes that I was between that and the Triumph, the 1958 Triumph. Those were the two bikes that I thought, okay, I got to get that. But by the time I went back with the camera, the guy was already left. I'm like, he left so early. It's like, but at least I got some pictures of it. But I know a guy. He's one town over, and he's a motorcycle instructor. And when he was, my dad told me stories about him with his Norton 750 or 850 Commando, whichever one he had. When he was younger, he said, "Yeah, that thing that had the front tire in the air all the time it was such a torquey bike, and it was fast and everything." But he talks about it. He says, "Oh yeah, my old Norton." He says, "Yeah," and then he's riding around on a Virago, right? Now I forget what he's got, but I think he might have. He's had like a Suzuki Intruder, big 1100 Virago. So he's had those bikes, and he's like, "Wow, yeah." He says, "I love this thing. Why? Because it's not like my old. I love my old Commando, but Norton Commando, but I don't have to touch anything on this thing." And there will come a point where even with classic bikes, where yes, they're fun to tinker with, but when you have to tinker with it, it's like, well, I just can't just get on it and ride without checking everything out first or whatever. And that's just kind of the territory of classic bikes. This is why they become the secondary bike. The guys that make them their primary ride, I know what it's like. I've been there, done it, and I can tell you, every time you start it, you always have that little gut feeling: is it going to start or not? And when it does start good, for a prolonged period of times, and you get secure with it, you're riding down a country road, everything's going, and all of a sudden something just dies on it. It throws it's old technology. It is what it is. Even after you rebuild them, there's always something, something that, it just is what it is with those type of bikes. What about older Japanese bikes? Well, anything from the 60s on is probably going to be pretty reliable. Probably more reliable than anything you're going to... I know it's going to get people mad, but this is why people liked the Japanese bikes back then. Is the same reason why they like them now, is they're reliable. Again, once you get all the bugs worked out of them, age is a thing. But to give you an idea, Honda 250, sitting out in the sun for 18 years with old gas in the tank. Customer brings it in and says, just want to see if it runs. We cleaned out the gas in the carb, okay, and there was old gas sitting in the carb too. Everything looked bad. Everything was like, this thing's not going to run. Half the tank was sun faded, whatever. It just sat there. We put a new battery in it to test it, and cleaned the carbs. Little spray in the cylinder. Took out the old plugs. Even with the old plugs, we cleaned them up, put them back just to check them, because we didn't have the proper plugs on hand, but just to check it. Hooked it up. Away it go. It smoked for a little bit. Then it just ran like a charm. It just ran, and the thing had like 1,000,000 miles on it. It was so bulletproof. I mean, it had the tires. We couldn't drive it because the tires were completely weather cracked. It was just unbelievable. I mean, there was birds' nests in the freaking exhaust. You name it. It was just, we had to do all that stuff, and boom, away it went. And you're starting to see guys riding around on these older CB350s and stuff like that, and as classic bikes. A lot of these classic Japanese bikes over there, everybody's turning them into calf racers. And I'll tell you why. Because the retro mod is cheaper than period, for sure. Because you don't have to you can just put whatever's cheap and functional on there. You don't necessarily have to, or take off whatever's not functional, rather than buy period correct parts. So a lot of guys are doing that. But there's a lot of guys, like, for example, I was looking at that CB400 4-banger with the guy said they only made them for 2 or 3 years, and it was a 76, and this thing was mint, mint, mint. So it was probably, he either bought it original because he was old enough, or he found it sitting in a barn somewhere, and it needs points and the condenser and whatever. It's a little bit rough, and but it's all there. And then he just took it and cleaned it up, re-chromed what needed to be chromed, and all that stuff. And you can still get parts for some of those bikes too. Maybe not everything, but you can get some stuff. And those bikes are great, yes, they're Japanese bikes, so you'd say, well, they don't hold any value. They don't have the charm of the Nortons or the Triumphs or the Harleys. But then you'd be wrong, because there is a lot of people, when I was riding, that was my first beater bike, was a CB750. And I was looking at a gorgeous specimen of a CB750 as well. And it's like, at the day, when in the 90s, you bought a bike like that because it was a beater bike, not because you liked the look of it. But you appreciate it because it got you, this 1979 CB750 ran like a freaking freight train. My cousin had one. I should have bought it. It was all there. It was all there. Now I'm looking for bikes that are all there. It's like, okay, and then just clean them up. And if you look at the resale value, like Japanese bikes used to be $500 bikes to $1,000 bikes max. You could buy yourself, the biggest in the 90s. Now it's like they're all $4,000 if they're running well and they look good. $4,000, $5,000. These are Japanese bikes. Why? Because they're easy to restore. That's one of the things. And you never question whether it's going to start or not. It doesn't mean none of them break down. I mean, I worked in a bike shop, and trust me, all we got was Japanese motorcycles in there most of the time. Very rarely did we get imports because, it was just, the Harley shop was down the street. We got the odd Harley in, but most Harley people went to the Harley shops unless they were tight on cash. They came to us. Our rates weren't dealership rates. We were a little bit lower, but it was still expensive. But we worked on them all. Gold Wings, as reliable as Gold Wings are, but when they got 1,000,000 miles on them, things break down. But the thing is when we're talking classic bikes, the nice thing about these older Japanese classic bikes too is they're really, really simple. Really well thought out, really, really simple. So even if they do break down, they're usually easy to get going again. So that's something for you to consider. You might not consider, but let's say, but I don't want a Japanese motorcycle because although I might be riding a rarer model now, it's still a Japanese bike, and I want something a little bit more really classic that, will turn heads, no doubt, other than just enthusiasts, where people watch you coming down the road, and it won't matter if they ride motorcycles or not. They'll just be, wow, that's a cool bike. And there is such bike that exists, and it exists since 1923, and there's been obviously several models. And whether you want to go to a completely antique bike, a classic bike, a vintage bike, whatever it is, you can find one in any flavor. And you can get them in any color you want as long as you want black. And that is the early R-Series BMWs. Whether we're talking an R24, an R25, an R35, an R50, R60, R69, /2/3/5 /7 6s and 7s. If you buy, I had a 1972 R60 BMW. Now, like all bikes, I bought this bike for $1,900. Was fairly period. It didn't have everything. It was missing a few bits, and like the tool bag wasn't 100% complete. I didn't have that little tire pump thing. There was some scratches in it. It had been dropped. There was a couple of things in it, and whatever. It was a little bit rough. Never ever hesitated to start. The only thing I ever replaced it on was two things. There were certain plugs I couldn't run because they ran too hot in that bike, and they would burn out. They just kept burning out on me, these plugs. The second thing was one of my plug wires was not very good. And I kept getting these backfirings out of the left cylinder, and I couldn't figure it out. I thought it was my coils, I thought it was this, thought of that. And it turned out it was just a plug wire. And I switched the plug wires around. It's like, oh, okay, so that's what it is. So I bought a piece of wire for, I don't know, 25 cents. Resoldered the ends, bang, there we go. It was just your mechanic's wire. It was a regular automotive plug wire. Made it fit, no problem. I made the plug wire a little bit too long, so it looked kind of funny sticking out the side of the bike. There's only the only other problems I experienced with that bike was because the Kickstarter was on the left side and kick rate. It was a really cool bike. I just got addicted to kicking it over, and it would always put on everybody. What's that thing? You know, so that's the Kickstarter. Well, no, Kickstarter goes on the other side and it only goes back. I said, no, this is BMW. And then people were like, woo, this is cool, you know. Basically, this was an R60/5. It was the same as the R75/5, just smaller cylinders. Everything else the same. Lower end, everything else the same. The R90 came along a little bit later. The R90S, when it came along, it was pretty much the same bottom end. Everything was the same. Even according to the manual, you could take the cylinders off the R90 and put them on the R60. It was obviously you would have to change the connecting rods and stuff like that, but everything else was the same. Like the crank and everything was the same. Maybe the flywheel might have been a different weight or whatever, but it was pretty much the crankcases were the same. Everything was the same. Those three bikes, stated by the manual. The only other thing I had to do was there was two things. Because the bike wasn't 100% period correct, there were some parts on it that were, although it was, I would say, 85%, well, no, it was probably closer to 90% period. Like, for example, my mirrors weren't the right mirrors for the right period. They were BMW mirrors, but one mirror was a different mirror than the other, I think, or something like that. Eventually, I lost both mirrors because I crashed the bike a few times. Doing stuff stupid. It wasn't the bike's fault. It was me. Because I kicked the bike over so many times, and would only kick it, I would neglect the starter. And I remember, I wonder if my starter still works. And I hit it one day, it would like that. So I got out the hammer, pulled the front cowl thing off, bang, bang. Yeah, it's an airplane engine, eh? So it's yeah, it had a cool sound to it. It shook cool when you know, it was a fun little bike to rev. It was quiet. It was very quiet, but it was just a real nice sound to it. I love those old BMWs. But it started all the time. The other problem I had with it, and this wasn't really a mechanical problem. What it was is the wrong clutch cable was put on it. You had the R50s, the R60s, and whatever, and your R75s, and the clutch cables were different. And when I would adjust my clutch, the clutch cable was too tight because it was an I kept ordering the R60/5 cable, but they kept giving me this short, and it was only short by an inch or so, R50 cable, and it wasn't enough, and it was too tight, and it would frail the cable at the handlebar or at the lever, and then it would snap on me. So, but the bike ran like a top. That was the only thing that I couldn't. I was going to have a cable made, is what it was, because like I got 3 brand new cables, and they replaced them for me too. I bought the first one, and I said, no, order me the longer one because this one's not the right one. And they kept ordering it, and I guess maybe there was a mix-up in the part numbers or whatever, and they kept giving me this short one. And I put it on, it would snap, and I like, dude, I was in here like a week ago. It's the same cable. And I came out and I showed them, see what I mean? Like the clutch arm, it's too tight. It needs to be, I need the longer cable. Can you make sure when they send me the next one that it's the right length? And this happened 3 times. Finally, I said, screw it. I just grabbed a piece of pliers, hoisted the cable around the cylinders, and it would just shift like this. It looked like I was riding a bucking bronco every time I would ride. But I rode it like that for, 18,000 miles, headache-free. Other than the fact that I was like, when people talk to me about, I remember this guy pulled up, it was an old knucklehead too. It was, I can't remember what year it was. It was a 41 or whatever, and I used to run into this guy from time to time. And he had the foot shifted out, and he goes, I figured this, I said, you got the suicide shift on there. He goes, oh yeah, that's not too bad. I said, yeah, I can one-up you. I'm holding my clutch cable. Yeah, pair of pliers. The best pliers in the world, and I lost them back in the field, and I've never found them again. I miss those pliers. These were so, whenever you get a pair of pliers that are just so good, and you lose them. I don't want to talk about it, guys. Yes, I'm getting emotional now. But if you had these pliers, you would understand why. Like I still to this day, every time I go back, I just take an extra look. I know it was around this area where I lost them. it's like I want those pliers back. I don't care if it takes me hell or high water. I want those pliers back. They were the best pliers in the world. And I just wrapped the cable around it. Yeah. But this bike was headache free. I mean, and it had a lot of mileage on it. It had, well, this is what, like, I remember somebody was saying, the bike I bought it from a Scottish guy who bought it from a priest. Yeah, I know this sounds like it's going to be the beginning of a joke. No, this is what happened. You know, like, yeah, a Scottish guy, a priest, and a biker walk into a bar. And ow! You think they would have noticed. Anyway, he bought it from the priest, who apparently only drove it on Sundays, rode it on Sundays, and then the bike had like 25,000 miles on it, or 19,000 miles. I can't remember I mean, this was back in the 90s, right? The Scottish guy, he bought something. I think he bought a newer BMW, like an R1. Well, it wasn't new, but it was like an R100. My friend's dad had an R100, and it was, I think it was mid 80s or whatever, and. So he got rid of the older BMW, and he sold it to me. And it was a nice guy, whatever, no problem. It came with the manual, came with everything. I'm glad it came with the manual, because it was, you know, where the hell was I going to get a manual for that? Yeah, all the parts, again, it was easy to get parts for. There was, I can't remember, Bob's BMW, I want to say. But anyway, this guy was like, if you needed something for, and any time I'd run into a guy with an R75, there wasn't too many R60s in Ottawa at the time. There was about 4 or 5 R75s /5s, because everybody wanted the bigger bike, right? They wanted the 750, not the 600. But I didn't mind having it, and I paid a good price for it, and I ran the piss out of it. I had it on the road for 2 years. 25,000 miles each year on it. I mean, I put some serious mileage on that bike, and it got great mileage. Now, it had the Bing carburetors on it, which were finicky, and no, you could never synchronize them. My Bing carburetors are synchronized. No, they're not. If they're Bings, they're not synchronized. You can't synchronize those things. But they work. They work great. They always work. They're simple. And they were finicky. You had to adjust them from time to time. Sometimes you get one running richer than the other, and you'd be checking your plugs and whatever, and the weather would change, and then, you know, it'd run a little bit different. But it would always run, and it'd always run well. And you never question whether it was going to start or not. So it's a bike that, if you're thinking about getting a classic bike, look at some of these older BMWs. The speedlight and the speedometer and tachometer in the headlight really grew on me. That was really cool. It was really cool. But it was a bike that you just didn't see all over the place. Now, most of my friends, obviously when I was riding that, I wanted to be riding a Harley. The bike that came after that was my Panhead. Because I was a Harley guy, right? But it was really cool. Like, it was kind of funny because, like, people would be like, they treated you different when you rode a BMW. You hear now, like, oh, the most stuck-up riders out there are the Harley riders. No, it's BMW riders. And I'm telling you from experience. The only nice BMW riders out there, okay, that will acknowledge anybody else is basically guys that ride these older BMWs. Because the other guys, they don't wave at you whatsoever. Even older BMW riders, it's like, or newer BMW riders would look at, oh, that's the old model. They're neat, but they lack the precision. You know, it's like you're gonna get those. Oh, well, you need to go to the K model because the K model was this and this, and they were great bikes. But it was just this arrogance that you would get with these guys. It was just like, oh my god, and they were so anal. Like there was a stereotype there. And then you get quite a few guys. They'd ride BMWs, they were fine. But it's like the Harley cliquey guys. You know, the guys that won't talk to anybody else unless they're riding a Harley or whatever. And you get the VMAX guys. Yeah, these guys, I swear to God, they were all hopped up on speed. And I'm not even talking about the bike. Like, well, my bike could take this. I pulled up beside this moped. I blew him away, man. Yeah, yeah. I pulled up beside this freaking soccer mom van. I blew them away, man. When I ride around, I look for Harleys I'll run up right beside them. I'll get by light. I'll blow them away, man. Yeah, the VMAX guys are all like that. It's like they're grudges against Harley guys for some reason. I don't know what it is. Yeah, they have to sit there and tell you how great the VMAX is because the Harley sucks, and it's funny how some of these. No, it's not all of them, but it was just something that I always found funny. It's like, oh yeah, VMAX, I rode one. Yeah, a lot of power. Wow, that's pretty. No, it's the most powerful. It's got this torque and blah blah blah. I mean, they're just okay. I believe you. Yeah, and then the BMW guys is like, hey, how's it going? What bike are you riding? I'm riding that old Beamer. You can't talk to me, you're not precise enough. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I remember this one guy, he had a K model, and it was just, he was the worst. He was just so, like, he just look at you like, why are you standing near us? Why are you talking to us? This is where the real, the real motorcycle riders with the precision bikes are, It's like, and then, okay, us R75 and R60 guys, we'll just sit here and nobody likes us, whatever. We'll just be friends with everybody. But I even would get the odd Harley guy would come over and they was just like, this thing, how do you ride it? It's like, with the cylinders out like that, your feet must get hot. I said, actually, no. I said, my feet never get cold, but they're never hot. I said, this bike, I've only overheated it in hot traffic once, and it was like 45 degrees out. I mean, it would just run and run and run and run and run, I said, and not only that, I mean, it would run well. Like, I mean, you could hold 70 miles an hour all day, 80 miles an hour all day on that bike. That bike topped out at 126 miles per hour. The bike was in miles per hour on the Speedo. So maybe it did 110. I don't know what the calibration would be. They say they would do 110, 110 miles an hour, which is, that's pretty darn good. 200 kilometers an hour on a 1972 bike was pretty good. Shaft drive, so it was pretty much maintenance free. That's the other big thing about these old BMWs. As long as you got everything in order, my shaft drive, it leaked a little bit, but it would seep. It wasn't like it didn't need all. It was just old seals in it. You know what I mean? It was pretty much a maintenance free bike. So if you want a classic bike that runs good, has a decent amount of power, I mean, it's not going to be a rocket ship by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, you got to wait for it to get up to speed a bit, but handles really well. I mean, you got to look at particularly the BMW R75s and R900s, like the 70s commercials. They're using these things like dirt bikes because they are a tall bike though. That's one thing. They are a very tall bike. The /5 series. The earlier ones, not so much. You could flat foot those. This thing, you were on your tippy toes. But it went around corners. Even on those skinny tires, it really, really went around corners well. And it was heavy enough to be a good highway bike. It was kind of an interesting thing. And the mileage, 50, 60 miles to the gallon. I mean, it was pretty good. I know a lot of guys did Mikuni carb conversions to replace the Bings, and it ran even better. Yeah, the nice thing about those bikes is, if you get one that's in decent shape, that runs, the parts aren't really that expensive in comparison to anything else. It's just that you're not replacing stuff that much. It was, points and stuff like that, so points and condenser. But you can update these things to, say, electronic ignition. Obviously, it was 12 volt. The one thing about the BMWs, the 72 BMWs, is all the electronics were in the headlight. It was a very neat bike that was wired up. The key, just be mindful that sometimes your key. I nearly ended up with an R75 accidentally. I was sitting there on the Byward Market one day, and there was all these bikes sitting there, and I parked beside the guy with the R75 because I knew him and whatever, and he said, "Oh, hey, Reg, how's it going? Yeah, it's a guy named Reggie on a BMW. How original, right?" I was like, okay. But people would come up to it, they would come up to it to see it because it was unique. It didn't look like any other motorcycle up there. It was very the girls would be like, "Oh, a BMW, ooh," like they didn't know what year it was or whatever. They didn't know it was the budget bike. It didn't matter. It was cool. I probably took more chicks on a ride on that BMW than even my Harley. It was just like, because you were approachable. Why? Because it's a BMW. It was like, well, nice people ride BMWs. Yes. Yes. I'm just teasing. I mean, I met the guy with the GS 1600 there last week. Nicest guy, nicest of guys that I met. I'm just teasing all the cliches there, but there's always those groups, those fanboys that are just, they just, it's like dealing with them is funny because it's just like, it's like they take it so seriously. But again, this was my daily ride. Like when people say, "Oh, your bike's a 72." Oh, geez, it must break down a lot. I'd be like, no, this thing never breaks down. Like, I mean, there was what got my bike in the end is I wore it out. The fork seals were done because I jumped. Steve McQuinn that bike. I went across the road with it. Like, I mean, it was like I was at the beach. I don't know. I was just like jumping like the road. Whatever. I was 20, okay? Like, I was like 22, 20, 21, 20, whatever. I was stupid, right? And I jumped, so no wonder my fork seals blew out on me. Like, I mean, I still rode it for another freaking 10,000 miles with blown fork seals. Just put the steering dampener on a little more. Oh, glory days. I had no mirrors on it. I always had to do shoulder checks all the time there. I remember I got pulled over by the cops once, and I was shocked. I was like, "You're pulling me over? I'm on a BMW." He goes, "Yeah," but he says, "You got no mirrors on the bike." I was, "Oh, no, they come like that." And it was optional. That's why the holes are there. I didn't tell them, no, they got stripped out when I crashed the bike a few times. The bars were kind of, get a big bar on there straight. That was a great bike, though. It was a great bike. And everybody loved it. It was just, like some people, like, because nobody felt threatened by a BMW rider. You know what I mean? It wasn't like the Harleys where it's, you could be a Hell's Angels or whatever. I was like, oh, no, it's a BMW. Oh, okay, well, that's cool. And it was a very social bike. Kind of like the way my Triumph is there now. Like that bike is super social. Everywhere I go, it makes friends. I saw a little meme there the other day. It was great. It's like all these little baby owls going like that. It's like the expression kids have when I rev my motorcycle, eh? And it's true, like, I see all the little kids in my town now, they're like, sorry, every time I go by them. I love doing that, But yeah, BMW, consider the R Series BMW. I know there's a long discussion, and I could have just got right to the point. But there's a reason why I do long discussions is because you get the idea of the frame of mind that you're going to need to buy a bike, especially older bikes. And right now, I got to get a car before I get another bike, and I'm trying to get rid of my trailer, and I got no cash and whatever. But yes, I don't mind. I want a Norton. I want a Triumph. I want another BMW. Heck, I'd probably even try to see if I can locate my old BMW. I'd probably be able to find it if I put the effort in. I know the mechanic I sold it to. He sold it to somebody else. So I just, who did you sell it to? I don't know. It was a guy in this area. Just tell me the area, and I'll just drive by and see if I can accidentally find it. You never know. But yeah, so these old bikes, I always wanted the R69, just because with the Urals forks there, because they were just so gorgeous, those old bikes, and they ran just as good. They didn't have electric start on them, I don't think, but it didn't matter because if you got a kickstart on it, it's the easiest bike you'll ever kick over is a BMW. I mean, you can start it with the palm of your hand if you do it right. Mind you, when they did kick back, they did send you up in the air, but they didn't send you over the bars. And it was a neat bike because you could put it on the center stand and just keep one foot on the peg. It was BMW. It was well thought out, right? Well thought out. That said, you get one, rebuild it. I bet you that sucker. There was one guy, he had an R75 with well over 300,000 miles on it, not kilometers, miles, and that would be like 500,000 kilometers. I mean, that's 500,000 kilometers on the bike, and it was still running on the original factory build. And this was back in the 90s. The bike's probably still running. I mean, it's just there were low compression engines, so I can imagine you had to replace, like some seals and stuff like that in it. But yeah, they're simple. They were BMW were airplane engine manufacturers first, right? And then they made pots and pans. They made all kinds of stuff. And then in 1923, they were able to build motorcycles again. after the war, and of course, everything started from there. But you could find these bikes; they are going up in price. And here's the thing: okay, I got rid of my R60, and I bought it for $1,900. I sold it for $1,100. Plus, I took the Yamaha SR500, which they making it now Yamaha SR400, kickstart only, fuel injection. Okay, now that's fine if it doesn't have that outrageous compression. The Yamaha SR500 is, this is not even debatable, is the most evil motorcycle ever built. It was always trying to kill me. It was fun to ride because it was so torquey for, I mean, this thing did roll on wheelies. It was just crazy. But kicking it over was just a nightmare. It had a long enough kick arm, but it was just that little tiny little, oh my God. And then when it kicked back, it slapped me in the back of the leg. It bruised my leg. Nearly broke my kneecap. I was kicking it, and it caught me under the shin and tossed me over the bars. It bruised the bone. It bruised the bone under the x-ray. I thought I broke my kneecap. I had to ride the bike to the hospital. My leg was swollen out like that. I was like, oh, I hated that bike. It was always trying to kill me. I told stories of it like a million times. And I read another guy describe saying, oh, that bike nearly broke my freaking leg trying to kick it over. I used to just run on it and jump like a Flintstone started because it was just safer. My landlord used to laugh at me. He's like, because it was like the house was right at the edge of a bus stop, and it was a nice long lane, so there was no traffic. I'd go and I'd run and put it in second gear, and then just take off, fuck warming it up, just keep going. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, the BMW never gave me problems. And that bike now, fully restored, is a $10,000 bike. So who knows what the prices of these things are going to go to in the future. But if you get one that's kind of rough and then just build it up over time, get the paint nice again, there's still OEM replacement parts. You can get it. Look out sources. And I see guys rebuilding these things. And again, it's something different than a Harley. It's probably going to the buy-in is going to be cheaper. And you might get one that's, maybe 85, 90% complete. Because people didn't really mod these bikes. So you don't have to, that's one of the problems you're going to have with a Harley. Is you find an older Harley, like say you find an old shovelhead, there's probably like 5 parts, that are original on it because everything's been customized so much, through the, the 70s, the 60s, 70s, the 80s. So you got the shovelhead engine that used to be cheap, and now you want to put it back to period correct. It's going to cost you, 25 grand to turn the bike back into what it was off the line. So it's hard to find original Harleys. And when you do, they're going to, you might get them like a 48 pan. You might find a 48 pan or 49 pan or something like that. 85, 95% complete. But when you get to the 95% there, usually it's been rebuilt or whatever. But and if it hasn't been rebuilt, then it's usually not going to be a daily rider. So when you get into those kind of, how accurate is it? It does become more expensive. There's a 36 knucklehead out there in a museum, never been rebuilt, and it's all there, and it looks pretty good. It sat in the barn forever and a day, and it just, there's some weathering on it, and it's worth $85,000 because even though it's rough, it still runs. It's never been rebuilt. It still has the original 6-volt. The battery was even the original battery was there. So they just have the battery sitting there. The bike doesn't run; it just sits in a museum. But you get the idea that it becomes a collector. But if you want something more than a collector, that's why I'd recommend that bike. Other bikes that would probably follow suit would be like Moto Guzzi's and stuff like that of the 70s and stuff like that. They probably are pretty reliable too. But yeah, it's just something for you to consider. I know it's a kind of a topic that you might I don't see anybody else covering a topic of what bike should you look at and stuff like that if you want a classic bike. What should you consider? But yeah, I'll leave it at that because I can go on forever and a day about my old bike and stuff like that. I am looking for project bikes out there. There's 2 One's a 750 Maxim, the other one's a 650 Maxim. I don't know what kind of condition they're in. I'd like to go and look at it. And when you do look at these old bikes, a little tip that you could do is bring a pen and paper with you. Okay, if you don't buy it on the spot, don't worry about it, because you're going to miss some anyway. But if there's obvious things that you can see that it's going to need, like number one, is it seized? If it's seized, you're talking rebuild, right? So $4,000. I don't care what it is. It's going to be $4,000 minimum, probably. So is it worth it? You know, like, is it worth it? If you're buying it to resell it, that's where you're going to really do this. If you're buying it because I had one of those bikes when I was younger, and I absolutely have to have that bike again, then price is no object, right? It's whatever you got in your pocket. That's what you're willing to pay, right? So there's that angle of it. So if you're buying like this 85-year-old man riding from Brockville, basically almost a 180-mile round trip from Brockville to Ladysmith, Quebec, on a 1958 Triumph T100, you're going to make sure that bike is running cherry. But that guy has probably owned that bike for so long. I don't think he was the original owner, but you might as well say he was, because he's had it so long that he knows exactly what the bike needs all the time. And you will get like that with old bikes. You're gonna know everything about it. For example, my Triumph Daytona TT that I got right now, that bike, I'm deciding what I want to do with it. Obviously, I think I'm going to go back to more of a cruiser style bike. I love the power of that thing, but it's like I can't unleash it on the road. You touch it, you touch it a bit. Sure, I've tapped out that bike. I rang the throttle, sure, it's fast. But you can't do that all the time, and you shouldn't really be doing that on the street. So where that bike needs to go is onto the track. But it's such a cool bike, I don't know if I want to do that. So the other option is, maybe ride it another few more years, but I would like to have a secondary bike to just take that bike and just, pull it apart, retime it, do this, make an inventory of every little thing it needs, and then it takes all the worries out of your head when you know the bike, when you know what it needs. Okay, well, when I encounter this problem, it's nothing serious. It's just doing this because of this, and you will encounter stuff like that. For example, this being my first fuel injection bike, something I've never considered before. I've replaced fuel screens on petcots for carbureted bikes, but I never thought about cleaning out the fuel pump strainer, which can cause rough running. Maintenance, things like that. So I'm going to do that on this bike this fall, unless it breaks down before that. I'm going to basically run this bike and then do like a zero-time complete tune-up, 100% tune-up on every aspect of the bike, so that I know every inch of the bike. Because I did this with all my other bikes. I did this with my Beamer. I did this whatever. With my Harley, I did it with my XS650. The XS650, I didn't have it for very long though. I don't even think I put that one on the road, to be honest with you. No, I didn't, because I took it because I needed the front end off of it. And then what else did I? My Kawasaki LTD 440. I mean, every nut and bolt. I turned every nut and bolt on that thing. So when you buy a bike, research the common problems of them. Research like I know there's a bunch of Triumph. Triumph Tigers are fairly easy to find for sale. The Bonnies are a little bit harder to find. But yeah, I know there's some of those for sale. There's a couple of Nortons for sale, but they're already almost complete, or you might as well say complete, and they're like, they're over 10 grand each. Now the thing is that this is one last thing I'll say is it cheaper? No, I'll save this for another video because I'm going on too long right now. All right, so anyway, I'll leave it at that. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Links down below. Thank you so much to everybody who has. Next to that, rate, subscribe, share, comment, like, be true to yourself, be true to others. Always do the right thing. Have yourselves a great day.